So church has always been a part of my life, but I knew the stories. I knew that Jesus died for us. I knew that God loved us, but they were just abstract concepts. I didn't have an understanding of how that related to my own personal life. After I got married to an unbeliever, and I stopped going to church completely, and we just went about life, just making our decisions. But then, then life then happens, doesn't it? And you start coming across all these life problems, and I suppose I didn't have an anchor, to fall back on to know how to solve some of the problems that I was coming across. And so unfortunately, I think I got divorced after 10 years of marriage. And it was at that point that I decided to then just try and retrace my steps to see, where things could have gone wrong. I was just trying to find answers, really. Then I came across this psychologist who spoke about the Bible and how it all makes all the sense, even psychologically. And that's when I remembered, my life growing up in church, and it sort of prodded me to try and go back and really try and get into this Christian life.
So I grew up in the furthest thing away from a Christian household as possible. I mean, I had no exposure to any sort of coming to church. And then when I came to Grace with Amber, and once I wanted to come more and learn more, and that's just sort of, from day one. And then I went to Explore, I went to Identity, I've now started to go into home groups, and I've sort of been given so many opportunities at Grace just to learn about Jesus and learn about the things that he can do for me.
I come from a pretty non-religious background. As a kid, you sort of saw the stories and things like that, the Noah's Ark and the creation stories, but never really the major meaning behind it. And then, so when I came to an adult, didn't really have that religious purpose or anything like that to turn to. Found community in sports and things like that, but really always struggled with a purpose before I found the church. The main sport I do is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. One of the pastors here, John Putt, he does Jiu-Jitsu with me. So he was a talking point I'd actually seen for a few years before I even reached out to him. There were a few signs around like financial things. I saw some people online who gave me some help with some struggles, and I realised it was from a religious perspective. So I turned to John and asked for some advice, and then he's been really supportive and led me to this church, and everyone else has been just the same.
Matty, my partner, he'd been coming a few weeks before me, and then he encouraged me and was like, look, come give it a try. If you don't like it, you don't like it, just see what it's like. And then I thought, oh, okay, I'll give it a go. And the first time I came, just absolutely loved it. And that's when I thought, no, I really, really, I want to be a part of this community.
One interesting point at work, I was just on shift, and we have a colleague who is of Muslim, he's a Muslim, and he was just talking to me, and I started explaining Christianity to him, so he had no sort of understanding, he hadn't sort of done anything, like he hadn't heard anything like that. And as soon as I started explaining it to him, I was like, okay, so that's just sort of putting it into words and being able to explain it to someone else helped me realise how I felt about it, and sort of cleared up my mind that I was like, okay, so this is what I believe. Because I'd already had somewhat of a discussion of a personal relationship with Jesus developing, but it hadn't fully developed until that point there where I was like, okay, so this is how I feel. And that was just sort of the point for me where I was like, okay, so this is me being a Christian now. And since that point, I haven't really looked back. It's been very positive from then.
For some reason, it all started making sense when I got back to reading the Bible and understanding, what, our fallen nature is, what Jesus did for us on the cross, what it all meant, and, what God's love is in our lives. So all that I was reading was starting to make sense, even in my own personal life, and where I could have potentially gone wrong myself. Because, when in life, sometimes you think you're doing the right thing and everybody else is wrong. But I started to see my own life, where I had been going wrong potentially.
It gives me a chance to reflect, sort of, I get guidance and assistance. If I do something wrong during the day, I know that I'm forgiven for that, but it allows me a chance to reflect and go, okay, so this is what I've done. When you're always given that sort of arm that sort of comes around you to sort of point you in the right direction, and that's it is really helpful for me, especially because I've never had that before, sort of had someone, that sort of guidance before. So it does really help in that sense.
So it's just made a change in my life in terms of how I see things, and how I relate to things, and just having that confidence that God is there for me. If I need anything, I can talk to him. I have that relationship with him now, and just having that confidence that I hopefully living according to the blueprint, and not just making my own random decisions like I did before. So yeah.
It makes a massive difference, not only like internally for your own confidence and things, knowing that someone else is always there for you, always looking out for you. It also has brought like us as a family closer as well. It's made a massive difference to that, and yeah, it's been a big change in my life. Yeah.
You just need to take that first step towards Jesus, because once you take that first step, you're not going to look back on that. As soon as you ask for forgiveness from Jesus, as soon as you pray for that, it's sort of like opening a new page on a new book. It's completely different to the day before once you start that dialogue.
So that feeling of a purpose, that when things were going wrong, it maybe turned sort of into a depressive state and really being negative, having the Jesus in your life and knowing him and understanding that he's got a better plan for you when things are going wrong, it's a massive comfort. And I think that's the biggest comfort for me, is how he's especially when things go wrong. It's all great when you can turn to God and be like, almost as if you're asking someone for favour, and can you bless my life in this way? And that's great, and obviously he has the power to do it. But the real big thing for me with walking with Jesus is knowing when things aren't going right and when things aren't hard, there's a bigger picture on the other side of it, and you walk in his path and his plan.
There's always a purpose to your struggles. It's not just you are struggling and that's that. You can look forward and think that there's light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not just all dark ahead of you.
So I would say I've spent most of my adult life, about 40 years plus, in a kind of spiritual wilderness, where I had a sense that I was living by Christian values, but I didn't have any faith. Something was missing, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it.
I went through a rough time with some people, and it caused me quite a few issues. Meant I wasn't focusing in school, I was missing lessons, and ended up leaving the school and redoing a year. That time was difficult, and then coming into this year, it was a bit of a rough time, because I didn't know how everything would go. And then I found Jesus through that. I found God, and he kind of got me through that. I had a pretty hard time. The more I prayed, the more I started devoting my life to him, it started getting better.
So there was a season where I lost my partner of several years. I had to leave my job because I was no longer happy, and as a result I lost my friends in that job. A lot of stuff fell apart very quickly, but I found that despite all of that, I was secure. There was this one moment, I was sitting in a field in Cornwall, and I just started talking. I'd never been much of a prayer, but I just started chatting, and I went, you know what, just this once, I'm going to trust that all of this is going to be fine. That was about a year ago, and I am happier than I've ever been. And that's when I started reading the Bible, started acknowledging the shepherd, and came to know Jesus as a result.
I've always been to church every Sunday. I was brought up in a pretty much fully religious Christian family. I was always taught about Christ. I went to all the groups, and I really just liked being in that environment of knowing about Christ and having other people who I could talk to about Jesus so that I could understand it a bit more for myself.
Lots of things happened at the right time, like coming here at the right time for me in my faith, going to Contagious, which is a youth camp in the summer. That was at the perfect time for me. And it just brought everything together. So I've got to this stage where I can trust him now.
25 years ago, I was with a good friend. they were involved in a church. I went to an Alpha course. There was a moment when I thought I was being called. I heard lots of testimonies, but God has a plan, and the plan was that wasn't the time. And about a year ago, in much more intimate circumstances, I did a second Alpha course. And after a few weeks, something just clicked and things fell into place. And I realised then that all this time when I thought perhaps I was just on my own and faith and religion was for other people, that actually God was with me the whole time.
The word I would use is restless. Whenever I was fretting, I felt like I had to fix it right now, otherwise more bad stuff would happen. But it was only when I went, I trust that this is all for a reason and all part of a plan, that I was able to just relax, let it be patient most of all, and everything I've ever been through always amounted to something that I was grateful for in the end. Christianity and church is not about following the rules and doing the right or wrong thing. It's accepting that you are a perfectly imperfect person and that bad things will happen, but as long as you trust that everything is all part of this bigger plan, there will be that sense of calm.
To some degree, my parents, they always taught me about Christ, and I always had that understanding, but to have that understanding for myself that Jesus hears my prayers and he loves me and he cares for me. And before, I used to worry a lot in my life, and I used to just bottle myself up, completely shut myself away from God. I wouldn't talk to him or anything. But now in church, for example, I sing the words in belief to the songs instead of just singing the words, not really knowing, just completely thinking about my own thing. It just makes a difference in the fact that I don't have to be alone in Christ. I can just trust him and talk to him instead of just bottling myself up and shutting myself away from Christ and pretty much everything in the environment.
I now know I can trust God, that throughout all the ups and downs, God has a plan for all of us. And that gives me a sense of purpose in all the big questions in my life, really, that I never really had before. I understood that Jesus made sense of everything. So the way I would describe it is, if your life was a jigsaw puzzle, at times for all of us, a couple of pieces fit neatly into place and everything seems to be going swimmingly. And then there are times when you force a couple of pieces together and somehow they fit. But it's like trying to do the puzzle with no picture on the box. And I think for me, I understand now that it's Jesus that provides that picture, and not just in black and white, in full colour. It's Jesus that makes sense of our lives, and it's Jesus who informs us how to live.
I'll always have Jesus who knows me, he knows what I've been going through, and he knows that he's there for me. And whatever happens in life, he has a plan for me, and it happens for a reason, because Jesus has prepared that for me and he has a plan for me. Jesus is there for you, he knows your every move, and Jesus has a plan for you. So make that first step to just say a prayer, just thank God for that day. Just make that first step of having that prayer.
He saved all of us, quite frankly. He's been the one to take our sin on board. None of us are perfect, none of us don't sin. So he's taken that on board for us and allowed us to have eternal life, which is just the most amazing thing ever.